Hey y'all, welcome to the Williams World. I'm Elizabeth,
I'm Ruben.
and today we're going to be talking to you about how to build your credit using a credit card. All right, before we get into how to build your credit using a credit card, just give you a little background history on each of us and why we came to even be interested in learning about credit and what it is and how it works. So for me, when I want to say probably a senior in high school or had just graduated, I went to a jewelry store and was super excited. And they were like, "Oh, we'll go ahead and approve you for a credit, right?" Gave me a credit card. The interest rate was like 21%, y'all. 21%. And the purchase was around $1,100. Yeah. So as you can imagine, at that point in my life, I wasn't making that much. I was just finished high school, and I didn't know anything about credit. So what I did was I was paying the bare minimum, right? Until I met this guy. So when I met my husband, I had that debt, the I think it was K Jewelers at the time, and I had debt from a computer school I had chose to go to. So I came into our relationship with debt, and this guy was like, "Yeah, no, this isn't gonna work." So long story short, I had to learn quickly about credit, and one thing I did then was I used a credit consolidating company. So they consolidated my debt, and then I was able to make one payment consistently, and they worked with the creditors, and then I was able to get it paid off. So my story about how I got introduced to credit wasn't the best because, again, we really didn't have those conversations in my household about what credit was, how to get it, and things like that. So that's my story. I hope that story helps you all, and hopefully you learn from our video some things that will help you build your credit and not have to go through what I went through. What was your story?
My story was really simple. My mom helped me get a credit card at 18, and she told me, she said, you could either pay your bills and it'll be a stairway to heaven, or you can not pay your bills and it'll be a doorway to hell. I wasn't real clear on what that meant, um, but it was very concerning. And for the longest time, I didn't use a credit card because I didn't understand the benefits of using it. So, because I didn't want to explore that doorway to hell, I never used a credit card. And when I finally started using it, I was not responsible with using it. I would set up an auto payment of $100 a month, and at the end of the year, I would still have a $999 balance on a $1,000 credit card, just because I got into the bad habit of using it and using it and using it and making a minimum payment. Only to later learn that I would have had to pay on that credit card for a number of years just to pay off $1,000 balance.
Yeah, and a little into the video, we'll look at actual credit card statement and show you some things that are actually put in place on your statement to help you avoid falling into the traps that we both fell into, and that was not being able to pay off our credit cards because we were paying just the bare minimum. All right, so why is it important to have good credit history, right? So let's talk about the basics first. What is a credit history? What does it look like? A credit score. So a credit score can be anywhere from 300 to 850. A typical good, quote unquote, good credit score by most creditors is 670. And of course, that is subjective because, again, creditors can choose to give you the loan or give you the credit card based on whatever levels they want. But typically, it's 670.
And as far as a good credit score, it ties directly into an interest rate. So the higher your credit score, the lower your interest rate on a loan that you may secure from a lender. Um, the lower your credit score, the higher interest rate, because that lender want to be reassured that you're going to pay back the money that they're lending you.
Yeah.
Um,
So, for example, if you were borrowing $100, right? Let's just say for easy math, I wanted to borrow $100 from a creditor, and my credit score was amazing, right? So I got an interest rate of 1%. So for every 100 I borrow, I would have to pay them back $1, right? Vice versa. Let's say my husband's credit score was not so good, and he got a 10% interest rate. For every $100 he borrowed, he'd have to pay back $10. So just imagine not having a good credit score can really add up really fast and make it really challenging in life to pay off debt, to get good credit cards and loans and things of that nature.
it's all The credit score also ties into employment, and employers can look at your credit score to determine, if they want to hire you. That is not the sole factor, but in my line of work in the U.S. military, it is directly tied to your security clearance. If you have a low credit score and you have a lot of debt on your credit report, your security clearance is looked at differently because they want to make sure that no one could utilize that uh, as leverage over you to say, hey, we'll pay down your debt if you give up secrets. When it comes to employment, is important, and it's also important when it comes to insurance, just basic car insurance. The higher your credit score, surprisingly, the lower your premium will be when you are renewing your security. When you're renewing your credit, your policy. Sorry. So it's important to have a good credit score for a number of reasons, and those are just a few that we wanted to bring to your attention today.
Yeah, and just to add to it, it could also affect you, of course, any company you're working with, whatever it might be. So if it's employment, or if it's going to get an apartment or a house, right? Or going to get a credit card, they all want to know that they can trust you to pay back your money, right? So again, your credit score shows that. Oh wow, this person has a good credit score, which means we can trust them, and more than likely they're going to pay back this loan. Vice versa, the credit score is not good. And there's another thing, having no credit. We'll discuss that in another video. And in many cases, no credit is just as bad as bad credit. But in any case, make sure you know your credit. And as again, like my mother-in-law told my husband, it can be the doorway to heaven or the doorway to hell. All right, next is how to monitor your credit. There are three major credit bureaus. There is Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. We tend to stick with, what is it?
Experian. We stick with Experian because they offer a free credit report once a year, and you can set up alerts where they'll monitor your credit monthly. And throughout the year, you can see, what's being paid off, what's your credit usage, and how you're tracking as far as towards a better score or a score that may not be as good. And you can take the precautions there to start improving your credit score and paying off some bills.
All right, so how to select the correct credit card for you, or credit cards, right? So I know for us, when we select credit cards, it just depends on why we're looking for the credit card. If we're looking for the credit card to build our credit, then we might look at one thing. If we're looking for a credit card to actually do like a major home improvement, we might be looking for something else.
To Liz's point, for my everyday credit card, things that I look for are cash back. I want to make sure that I have a competitive APR, annual percentage rate. I also want to make sure I'm not being charged any annual fees or any foreign transaction fees if I happen to travel. If I'm looking to do a large purchase, some of the things that I would look for or consider are a 0% interest rate with at least 15 months. And I'm not so much concerned about the annual percentage rate after that, because the plan is to pay that credit card off within that 15 months, or however long that 0% interest program is going to run.
All right, up next, we're going to talk about how having a credit card affects your credit score, be it good or not so good.
Initially, when you apply for a credit card, you're going to experience what they call a hard hit. So if you were to look at your credit history, you would see a hard hit, and you may even see that your credit card was negatively affected slightly. It's part of the process, and what you do after that will determine what happens next. So you get the credit card, you utilize the credit card, and if you pay your bills, again, that slight negativity on your credit history will repair itself. If you choose not to pay your bills, then it would just be a downhill spiral from there, and that's how a credit card could affect your credit score. But don't be afraid. to get a hard hit. Again, it's part of the process so that the lender could determine what's going to be the amount of money that they want to either lend you or what they want to give you as far as a credit card balance.
Right. So if I could just add, because one of the things that I listen to this and I'm like, man, for a person who's actually like, oh man, I'm trying to build my credit and or start credit, you're like, well, if I can't get a hard hit, then how do I get credit? And it's just like it's crazy, right? So again, like my husband was saying, don't be afraid to have those hard hits, right? Just monitor how many you have in a short period of time. All right. Up next, we're going to talk about the basics of using a credit card, right? First and foremost, pay your bill on time. And then the next one is making sure to pay your bill in full. And in a little bit, we're going to actually look at a credit card statement and we'll break that down and kind of explain what we mean by that. And then the next one is keep your balances low or as low as possible. And again, this is when you're trying to build your credit. And then next is monitor your spending. So know what you're spending, how much you're spending, what your balances are, and so forth. And then lastly, earn rewards. And again, we're going to look at a credit card statement and we'll talk a little bit more about rewards, but you could have cash rewards, you could have point rewards, you could have freaking flyer rewards, all kind of rewards. So those are just some tips on how the basics of using a credit card. All right, now let's go ahead and look at one of our credit card statements. When building your credit using a credit card, one of the important things to do is actually know how to read your credit card statement. So what we have here is a copy of my most recent credit card statement. And as you notice, the first thing you'll see is the new balance. So in this case, my new balance was $458.62. Minimum payment due was $0. And then if I had a payment, it would have been due September 14th, 2021. Going down the statement, the next thing that we look at, you see the summary of account activity. And that's pretty self-explanatory. You see previous balance, payments that I made, credits, and new purchases. And then everything else was zeroed out. So over to the payment information. So again, we see that new balance. So the new balance again was $458.62. Minimum payment due was $0. So the reason my minimum payment due was $0 is because, as you can see over here, over on the summary of account activity, I didn't have a previous balance. So there was nothing that was due. However, one thing to note on your credit card statement is the late payment warning. On here, if I did have a payment due and I did not make that on time, I would have to pay at a late fee of $35. So make sure you pay your bills on time. And then there's also something called a minimum payment warning. And this pretty much just tells you, okay, if you took the new balance, which in my case was the $458.62, and only paid the minimum payment, it would take me 3 years to pay it off, and it would actually cost me $539, which is a difference of about $80 some I'd have to spend just in interest. And the other thing to point out is if you're ever in need of credit counseling service, you can, of course, Google numbers and it's on your credit card statement. So if you're in a situation where you're trying to build your credit, this is a great company. They might be a good place to start so that you can begin building your credit and maybe consolidating debt or whatever might need to be done to build your credit. All right, going down the statement, you'll see payments and credits. You see payments that I made, and then you'll see the credits. The credit that you saw at the top, the $17.27, in my case was just rewards. I just redeemed my reward points and put it towards the credit card. And then there was another payment. And then, of course, here you'll see the actual transactions I made during that time, during this credit card period. And that is something to definitely take a look at. Because again, people make mistakes, companies make mistakes. So just make sure you go through and look at all your payments for that month and make sure they are accurate. And then down here, you'll see total fees for this period. I paid $0 because I paid my credit card off. So therefore, I didn't have any fees.
When you get here, you could take a look at the annual percentage rate. Again, that's something we look for when looking at credit cards, and 10.90% is a really, really great interest rate. It goes hand in hand with good credit, and that good credit we establishes 670 or above. Here is the statement about paying interest and your grace period. You can see if you pay the new balance by the due date, you wouldn't incur any interest on the $458.62 that's due by September 14th, 2021.
So just make sure you look at your statement and look for that, because again, that's how we avoid paying this 10.9% interest rate, or whatever your interest rate is we make sure we look at our statement, we find out exactly what's due. So again, the due balance in this case for me was up here at the top left. It was also down here in the payment information. And we just make sure we know exactly what that is and when it's due, and we make sure to pay it off before that due date, on or before that due date. And lastly, just notice there are additional disclosures on your credit card statement. They do report information to credit bureaus, which we said, so make sure you make your payments on time. If you notice any mistakes, make sure you reach out to your credit card companies, because again, they do make mistakes. And lastly, if you're dissatisfied with a purchase, make sure you contact your credit card company. We've had instances where that's happened, and the credit card company actually went to bat for us. They gave us our money back, and then they dealt with the dispute with their with that company. So again, understand your statements, a really, really important part of building your credit with credit cards. All right, y'all. I know we went over a lot of information, and I hope you found it helpful. So we're just going to do a recap on how to build your credit using credit cards. So first, you're going to make sure you know what good credit is, and we already went over that for you. Second, you're going to monitor your credit. Third, select the best credit card for you. Fourth, use your credit card to improve your credit score. Fifth, understand the basics of using a credit card. And then finally, understand how to read your credit card statements. So we hope you enjoyed everything. Stay tuned for more videos with financial tips. Until next time, be well.
Peace.